Hello, this is Bev Holden from the Clear Thinking Partnership, and this is episode 10 in the series of Collaborate Live, where we're exploring collaboration from a range of different perspectives. And today I'm really pleased to be joined by Doug Shaw from What Goes Around. Now, Doug and I have known each other, unsurprisingly, over Twitter for a little while, but we've met in person as well. But what really interests me about the work that Doug does is that collaboration is completely and utterly at the core of what he does. It's part and parcel of his work. So good morning, Doug, and welcome.
Good morning to you, Bev, and thanks very much for the invitation. It's a real pleasure to see you, albeit not in real life, but the next best thing.
Thanks, it's great to have you here. So you've already got an idea of what we're exploring here in terms of collaboration, how it affects the work that you do, and some of the experiences that you've had of really great collaboration, the kind of conditions that are in place when great collaboration happens, and your live experiences. So let's start there. Let's start with some of the real positive experiences that you've had of collaboration and what you think has contributed to such a positive experience.
Okay, it's a really lovely question. It's a really interesting question because it's prompted me to really kind of go through a lot of the work I do and try and filter out those environments and behaviours that help to facilitate a more positive experience. And I'm conscious that not everything is immediately and directly transferable. So I've been trying to think about those rare things that seem to exist in more than one place and time that might be useful. And I think one of the things that I've noticed, both before I started running this business, so when I worked in BT, I worked in a sales and marketing role, and then I worked in a corporate social responsibility environment, and then I moved into some change management stuff. And one of the things that I was thinking about those different roles was that the basic principle of having ready access to information openly is a really helpful thing. And at that time, a lot of kind of social networks were still very much in their infancy. And actually, I can recall as a sales team experimenting with tools like Facebook when they were really looked and felt much differently to which they do now. So when we're talking going back to kind of 2009, 2008, and getting kind of quizzical looks at first from people as to why on earth we'd be using things like this. But our argument, if you like, or our assertion why they were helpful was that they were things that everybody could access, whether you were in or out of the organisation, security settings permitting. Then they were places you could go to collaborate, and we would meet and chat in places like that quite often. And I've noticed that over the years, having easy access to relevant information is really helpful. So using tools like Google Drive to be able to share and edit documentation is so much easier than pinging stuff around on email between each other, for example. So you never have to worry about whether you're looking at the most up-to-date piece. You know where to find it, and you know that you can even, if you and I were working together on a project, we could even be editing the thing simultaneously. You could see me making changes to it and vice versa. So I think one of the things that's really important is having access to relevant information, and the more we can do to make that stuff readily available, so I don't have to come and ask you for it. I know where it is, and I can just go and get it. I think there's something really empowering about that. And my experience in working with organisations is that more that we can make that relevant information easily available, the easier it is for people to adopt it, manipulate it, draw their own conclusions from it. But just having it in the first place without having to go to ask for it is something that I think more open networking is making much more straightforward. So I think that's something that I've observed that's really, really helpful. And like I say, it goes right back to my days in big companies. I think for me, one of the things that's very exciting about more open networking is the realization among people that good work is co-creative and coactive. And what I mean by coactive is specifically when we engage in a practice of doing things with each other rather than doing things to each other. So rather than being told what to do, we're kind of figuring it out. We're figuring it out together. And I was really fortunate. I was asked to go and do some work with the Latvian government in the spring of this year, broadly around the concept of smart use of social media. So Latvia take their turn of the stewardship of the EU presidency at the beginning of the next calendar year, and they're really keen to take advantage of social networks to create a more inclusive feel around the presidency. And as it happens, they're technologically really well enabled to do that. So as a country, they've got super fast internet all over the place. You know, you can go and sit in a park and up pops a Wi-Fi signal. They're really switched on like that. So they've got the tech to make this kind of thing happen. But they felt they were a little bit unsure about the manner in which they would use things, use the tools to get the best out of them. So I spent a couple of weeks with them, and what quickly became very clear to me was that there was all manner of wisdom and creativity already in the room. You know, it never ceases to amaze me that the organisations that I work with, you know, the wisdom, the knowledge, the spark, it's all there. I don't, to be brutally honest with you, I don't really think I bring a lot to the table in that respect. You know, I think that if I have a skill, I think it's in enabling people to open up and give them the sort of space, permission and time, if you like, to recognise that the answers to most of their problems are either in their own heads as individuals or can come about as a result of conversing. So lots of my work is conversational, and the team in Latvia, it was fascinating watching us move from a kind of almost like a sort of training program approach, I suppose, initially, but very quickly into a co-creative way of working. So talking about some vague principles like the importance of visuals in collaboration, and realizing that there was lots of expertise in the room, and we were doing exercises involving photography and getting outside and bringing that kind of visual environment back into the room and understanding how that represented the kind of needs and wants that they had from the presidency. That if we'd stuck to a sort of train track type of schedule, we probably wouldn't have come across. But by throwing things open to them and finding out what interests and inspires and motivates people, you know, you can bring a lot more value into the into whatever project you're working on, I think.
Yeah, that's really interesting. There's a couple of things you said that have really got me thinking, and that thing about having a train track that you move along doesn't allow for the randomness of being creative and innovative. So you've kind of, if people are going to collaborate, there have to be moments where it's a bit chaotic, I think, in my experience, and then other moments where it comes back together again. It's a little bit more ordered.
Yeah, I agree. I think so. One of the things I was thinking about that whole concept, I've been thinking about it a lot this year, and for a bit of fun, I invented a fictitious machine, a sort of creativity ebb and flow meter, and it was just a set of knobs and dials, and that you could, you know, twist and fiddle around with and stretch. And really, all it was about was recognizing that there are a whole bunch of tensions at play when we're working together, and that actually, if you're looking for a collaborative environment or a creative environment, you don't just walk in and push that button and it happens. You have to be mindful of, you know, what is the prevailing culture in this space that I'm moving into? How many projects are already going on? You know, is what we're about to do just going to add to the confusion? Should we be rolling this into something else? What's the tolerance for chaos? You know, how does that feel? Simon Heath wrote a really interesting blog post a few days ago about this almost obsession with failing at the moment, and he was trying to put it back in its box and recognizing that actually it's not kind of okay to fail point blank. You know, what are the consequences of all of this stuff? And it is all about the environment, the permissions, you know, how do you set that space up? What kind of tolerances are there? So I think you need to be very mindful that these dials could be very, very different in all the different experiences that you're working in. As long as the kind of goal, I suppose, is clear amongst people, then you adjust those tensions as you move through things to get the best outcome.
Yeah, that there is that need to constantly be flexing and adjusting that collaborative environment, and bearing in mind everything that's happening right now, and everything that might come. And I know that's a lot to contend with, but I think you have to pay some respect to those things and those experiences that people are having.
Yeah.
The other thing that you said at the beginning that really interested me, and it made me think about the psychology of collaboration, was about access to knowledge and information. And when everybody gets access to that same information, it creates, rather than a hierarchical structure where people have power and some people don't, it does put everybody on that equal footing. And I think that's a really key ingredient in great collaboration, that people have access to the information that will help them to contribute to whatever the end game is, without feeling someone else holds on to all of that and they can only have it if they ask, or when it's to be released out into the wild. So I think that's an important factor, I think, for me on reflection when I heard you say that and describe that point.
Yes, and I think there are two other things that go really nicely with that, and for me, their enthusiasm. That's a really vital ingredient. I think you want willing participants, not prisoners, ideally. And if you end up with a bunch of prisoners, then you need to try and find a way to sort of mentally liberate them if you can. But I think that part of what drives enthusiasm is that ease of access. So I think there's something that the two are. Have a connection, if you like. And I think the other thing that's really interesting and important when you're trying to set up a collaborative environment is to find a way to embrace difference, which is something that I don't think we're typically particularly good at. But again, I think that having open access to stuff in the first place invites people to put forward different points of view, because it's there. It hasn't got to be asked for. So I suppose there's something about creating a less judgmental playing field, if you like. So in order to encourage that difference, we need to think about how we feed back to it, so that difference isn't squashed. And actually, a lot of the work I do that involves bringing artistic practice into collaboration is very interesting from a positioning things in a non-judgmental environment, because the reason most of us believe that we can't draw or sketch or paint or whatever is because we've had it kind of judged out of us. And actually, we could all do it when we were little kids. What's gone wrong in the in-between? So I find playing around with that kind of stuff is enormously helpful in helping people get past that worry about being judged, and perhaps even more further down the line, even looking to develop it into a much more sort of co-creative and coaching type of environment.
That really resonates for me, because I think people hold back from making a contribution if they do feel like they're going to be judged, and so doing something that perhaps is a little bit out of the norm. So bringing art into the workplace, which not everyone is doing. So bringing that in does, I think, allow people to experience judgment in a different way, and get over the fact that they might have had some negative emotions around it, because I think those emotions that get in the way of them saying what they think, and presenting their arguments and their ideas in a really constructive way, because there's that fear always, isn't there, if they've lost, well, if they do fear being judged. So yeah, that's really interesting. Excellent. So that's great, because I think within what we've talked about so far, you've really nicely woven in some of your real life experiences and what you do, and I love that. I've seen the picture of your machine and all the dials, and I think that's a really innovative way of getting people to explore the tension that happens when we're being creative. And I think in the stories that you've told, you've woven in the work that you do with some of the conditions and factors that you think are really important around collaboration. So that's been really interesting. So it kind of leaves me to the last question, which is about, if you could collaborate with anybody, who would that be, and why would you choose to collaborate with them?
Okay. This could have gone in a zillion different directions, because there are all sorts of people, dead and alive, that I'm admiring of. I do a lot of work with a lovely lady by the name of Meg Pepin, and she's a fascinating person to work with, very honest and very, very helpful and very supportive. But when I was coming to think about this in the last kind of couple of hours, if you like, I've just come back from a super weekend away with some lovely friends, and we spent Friday night sitting on a beach with a little fire. It was a super calm evening, and we just talked the night away. And when I reflected on how much I enjoyed that, and I reflected on the question, I'm going to pick a couple of people who are sadly no longer with us, but one of my heroes is the late great Joe Strummer, who fronted the Clash, who I think is he's an inspiration to me for all sorts of reasons that we don't have time to go into right now. But he was a big fan of campfires and singing and songwriting. And one of the other things that I did when we were sitting at the campfire was I had a go at painting, albeit there was virtually no light. I just had some acrylic paint, and we played around with a few ideas, and that action brought to mind another hero of mine, a guy by the name of Henri Matisse, who is one of the preeminent artists of the last kind of 100 years, and I think he's a fascinating example of adaptability, simplicity, and collaboration, because he used lots of people to help him in his work, particularly in his later years when he became too ill to do much of it himself. So I think if I was to, if that would be the kind of pinnacle of my collaborative experience, would be sitting around a bonfire with a box of paints and a guitar or two with Joe Strummer and Henri Matisse, and we would just probably put the world to rights in a thoroughly impractical way, but we'd have an awful lot of fun doing it.
It sounds brilliant. Thanks, Doug. You've given us such an insight into the work that you do, even in just 15 short minutes, which is great. And it's one of the reasons why I really like keeping these interviews really short, is that people just share such amazing experiences. So I'm really grateful for you telling us about that. So this has been episode 10 of the Collaborate Live series with Doug Shaw. We'll be back again in a week or so, and I think we've got a double bill for our next Collaborate Live. So, and one day we'll have 2 interviews. So that's going to be really exciting. But for now, I'd like to say thank you to Doug, and we'll be back again shortly with more in Collaborate Live. Thank you very much.
Thanks for the opportunity. Cheers.